Welcome to The Analytic Christian, the channel that helps you explore Christian philosophy and theology. I'm joined for a second time by Dr. Chris Tucker. Hello, Dr. Tucker.
Hey, how's it going?
He is a professor of philosophy at William & Mary, and he's going to be answering this week's question. So this viewer asked, say one has what they believe to be a properly basic belief in God. How would this affect one's priors when evaluating the evidence for the existence of God? Should this make arguments for God's existence more compelling for this person? Why or why not? Why not? There's a few things we might need to break down. Properly basic and priors are a big part of that. So go ahead and answer this for us.
Okay, good. So properly basic, I think what the person means is that a belief is properly basic when it's reasonable without an argument, right? Properly basic beliefs can still be based on things like experiences. Right now, I believe I'm sort of staring in the general vicinity of my computer screen, and then I'm in the middle of an interview, and those beliefs are based on experiences I'm having right now. So those beliefs are properly basic. They're basic in that they're not based on another belief. They're based on an experience. And they're proper because they're properly based in that way. So it's just a way of talking about reasonable beliefs that aren't based on arguments, basically. The other thing I think that you wanted me to break down was priors. I think rather than using the language of priors, it's probably just as easy to talk about whether we can have properly basic belief in the premises of theistic arguments. I think that's kind of the thing the person was getting at. So the prior probabilities are more or less the idea, sort of the probability of a proposition, as it's sort of before taking into account anything else. It gets very technical. But I think what the person has in mind is something like, look, if I can just reasonably believe that God exists on the basis of an experience, and that's why I reasonably believe that God exists, I had a religious experience of some kind. It may not be some fancy religious experience like, Jesus descending from the throne or something. It could just be something like I'm reading the Bible and then I become overwhelmed with God's love for me. Things like that, if those religious experiences can count as evidence, as some theories in epistemology allow them to do, then I can reasonably base my belief in God on these sort of experiences. So if belief in God can be reasonably based on things like experiences, the way things seem, then the premises of complicated theological arguments like the teleological argument or the cosmological argument. If you don't know what those terms mean, it doesn't really matter. They're just different arguments for God's existence. And I think what the person's getting at is, even if I don't have a good argument for the premises of these arguments, if I have properly basic belief in God, how should that affect to what extent I reasonably believe these premises, even without fancy arguments for these premises? I think, so the question was sort of like, should these premises seem more compelling? Should they be more compelling? I think maybe should is too strong. But if you have a properly basic belief in God, if the way that you just intuitively perceive the world is a way that God is there, then it's not going to be shocking if a belief like that or a way of looking at the world like that comes with other things that are correlated with it, right? If your belief in God is probably affecting how you view or perceive the world. So if you are viewing the world as having God in it, it's going to be very plausible that the premises of theistic arguments seem more plausible to you than they otherwise would have. In other words, it's not going to be surprising if properly basic belief in God were correlated with a greater likelihood for properly basic belief in the premises of theistic arguments. But it's just a likelihood. I mean, it could seem overwhelmingly obvious to you that God exists, and the premises of these theological arguments just not seem plausible. That's quite possible, and that's not something you should feel ashamed about, I don't think. So the answer to the question is not really that you should find these theistic arguments more compelling, but it's not surprising if you do, precisely because the way we view the world is going to be shaped by our belief that God exists, loves us.
That was really clear. Thank you. All right. That concludes this Ask a Scholar video. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask a scholar, please become one of my patrons for the $10 a month tier, and you can submit your questions, and I will contact a scholar and try to get them to answer. All right. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Dr. Tucker, for joining me.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you next time.